The following clip is from a Quran chapter analysis video I made that is a part of my broader, in-depth Studying the Study Quran playlist. Whether you are a Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist, etc., I believe you will learn a lot about Islam and religion in general from watching this series. So please feel free to check out the full playlist by clicking on the end screen or the link in the description for it. Or if you're just interested in seeing the video that this clip was taken from, I'll provide a link and an end screen for it as well. But without further ado, here is the clip you actually wanted to watch when you clicked on my face. Enjoy. Alright, so the first verse that I would like to read in chapter 12 of the Quran is verse 18. And to give you some background on this verse, most of at least the early portion of chapter 12 concerning the story of Joseph is pretty similar to the Genesis account. If you remember in Genesis, Joseph has these dreams, one of which is here in the Quran, and it's this dream about the sun and the moon and the 11 stars all prostrating themselves before him. He tells this dream to his brothers and his family, and everybody's kind of pissed off. And Joseph's brothers in particular are extremely pissed off. Joseph's brothers, they take Joseph out into the wilderness, and they basically devise a plot to get rid of him. And they throw him down a well. And this verse, verse 18, concerns what happens whenever Joseph's brothers return from disposing of Joseph. And they tell Jacob, their father, about what happened. Of course, they don't really tell him what happened. They lie to him. And this verse, verse 18, is Jacob's reaction, and I find it very, very interesting, and there are a couple footnotes that go along with this verse that I think are really powerful and really good and are worth discussing. So let's go ahead and read the verse, and then we'll read those footnotes. And they brought forth his shirt with false blood. He said, "Nay, your souls have seduced you in this matter. Beautiful patience, and God is the one whose help is sought against that which you describe." And now for the footnotes. The brothers had Joseph's shirt from the moment they had torn it off him before they cast him into the well. See Genesis chapter 37 verse 3, which says that Jacob loved Joseph so much that he made him a long robe with sleeves, or a coat of many colors. Before returning to Jacob at night, they spattered false blood on the shirt from either a baby goat or a lamb that the brothers slaughtered for this purpose. In Genesis, it was the blood of a goat. Jacob's response, "Nay, your souls have seduced you," indicates that they had convinced themselves that their actions were not grievous, but that he did not believe them. Next footnote. Upon hearing the brothers' blatant lie and seeing their false evidence, Jacob exclaimed, "Beautiful patience," which refers to a kind of patience that causes one not to complain to anyone but God. Some interpret it to mean, my patience is/will be a beautiful patience. Thus, beautiful patience is an expression used at times of extreme grief to find solace in the fact that patience will triumph in the end and that the difficulty will eventually pass. God is the one whose help is sought against that which you describe, means that Jacob seeks God's help in bearing the lie that his sons were telling him concerning Joseph's death. I really like this concept of beautiful patience. It comes up later in this chapter, but I just find it here in this instance to be particularly profound in that, Jacob just lost his son, and he can tell that his other sons are lying about what happened to Joseph. And his response, rather than just completely having a breakdown in either a violent or pathetic way, he exclaims beautiful patience. And he just has this faith that if he's patient, in the end, the truth will come out. The answer to what really happened will be made clear. And, God will make all things good in time. And it's it's almost like Jacob here is embracing the discomfort of having to wait for the time when God decides to grant him the answers that he so desperately desires concerning Joseph and what happened to him, and etc. So I just really like this verse and this concept. These footnotes really help flesh it out. And beautiful patience. That's a concept I think I'm gonna try to remember in my day-to-day life when life does not seem beautiful. Basically, what happens after this, Joseph is, much like in this Genesis account, exalted to kind of a powerful, station in Egypt, and he oversees a lot of stuff. He oversees, there's the whole 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty thing that's recorded in the original Genesis account that happens that Joseph overseas. Joseph's brothers, they come to Egypt because they need food, because it's the years of kind of suffering and famine. And of course Joseph has done a good job with stocking up grain houses and preserving food for people. And basically Joseph's brothers are coming to Egypt to get food to survive. And Joseph recognizes his brothers. Of course they don't recognize him. And so when they try to, come and trade with Joseph in exchange for food, Joseph is basically like, hey, I see that you guys all want a portion of food for yourselves, but you're asking for an extra for some other brother of yours. How do I know this person is real? Bring this brother that is not here to Egypt, and then I'll give you the full measure. But until then, I don't know what to do with you, basically. That's kind of Joseph's attitude towards his brothers, because he wants them to bring Benjamin, Joseph's one brother who really wasn't so bad. He wants his wayward brothers to bring Benjamin to Egypt. And so they are like, oh gosh, okay, I guess we got to do that. And so they go back to Jacob, and there's this whole kind of conversation where they're like, hey, we need to bring Benjamin with us, otherwise we're not going to get the food we need to survive. And Jacob is like, he doesn't trust these guys. He feels like this is, the story of Joseph all over again. But he eventually relents, says, you can take Benjamin with you. What happens is Joseph's brothers and Benjamin, they're in Egypt. They're trying to, trade, for food and whatnot. And Joseph devises a scheme to put the king's cup in one of Benjamin's feed sacks. And the idea here is he's going to frame Benjamin as a thief. And secretly, Joseph kind of has this all planned out to where rather than Benjamin getting the normal punishment that is associated with thieves, Joseph will just be able to take Benjamin into his care. He's got this all worked out. But the idea here is that Joseph is wanting to force his brothers into, emotional and psychological and spiritual disarray. They're about to unwillingly this time say goodbye to one of their brothers. But they have no explanation for why the cup is in Benjamin's sack. So they have to be like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna have to let Benjamin stay with this guy who they don't know is Joseph yet, and they fear for him, and they're all kind of freaking out. So this next passage I'd like to read and discuss concerns verses 83 through 87. Joseph's brothers return to Jacob to tell him what's going on. Now, not everybody goes. A couple brothers stay back. Obviously, Benjamin stays back because he's in Joseph's custody, and Reuben, one of Joseph's brothers, stays back just to make sure things don't get wild. But the other brothers, they go back to Jacob, and they're like, hey, this is what's happened. That's what these verses pertain to, and I think we're going to go verse by verse, read a verse, then read a footnote, maybe discuss, and then read next verse, footnote, and so on and so forth, because this is good stuff, and it's important to know, and there's some really rich material here. So let's go ahead and read verse 83 and then the footnote. He said, "Nay, your souls have seduced you in this matter. Beautiful patience. It may be that God will bring them to me all together. Truly, he is the knowing, the wise." So the idea here in verse 83 is that when Joseph's brothers tell Jacob that, hey, we've lost Benjamin because of this whole thing. Benjamin stole this cup. Jacob, much like whenever they told him of the news of Joseph's loss, he doesn't really believe him. He's like, hey, there's something fishy with what you're saying. And this footnote here kind of goes into that. Jacob's words here are similar to his response to the news of the loss of Joseph in verse 18. The pronoun them refers to Joseph, Benjamin, and Reuben, who were still in Egypt. Such a statement is a kind of prophecy, since Joseph was still not known to be alive. It's interesting here, isn't it? Where it says, because Jacob does say, it may be that God will bring them to me all together, including Joseph. Like it's clear that Jacob still believes Joseph is somewhere out there, and this idea of beautiful patience, again, Jacob is waiting for the time when God will resolve everything and make all things clear. Really powerful stuff. Let's read verse 84. And he turned away from them and said, "Oh, how great is my grief for Joseph! His eyes had turned white with grief, and he was choked with anguish." Now for the footnote. It is said that in his sadness, Jacob wept so much that he went blind, or that his eyesight became very weak, which is indicated by the words, his eyes had turned white. This detail plays a role later. Let's move on. They said, "By God, wilt thou go on remembering Joseph till thou art ill to the point of death, or till thou hast perished?" He said, "I complain of my sorrow and grief to God alone, and I know from God that which you know not." And now for the footnote associated with 85 and 86. The brothers' question, motivated by love and compassion for their father, is a figurative way of telling him that they fear for his demise if he continues to grieve over Joseph. That Jacob complains of his sorrow and grief to God alone harkens back to verses 18 and 83, where he counsels himself to have beautiful patience, which is a form of patience in which one complains only to God about one's suffering and not to other human beings. See chapter 12, verse 18, "I know from God that which you know not," is interpreted by some to refer to Jacob's intuitive knowledge that Joseph was still alive. Again, just this idea of beautiful patience, I just find to be beautiful. Let's read verse 87 and that footnote. "O my sons, go and inquire about Joseph and his brother, and despair not of God's comfort. Truly none despairs of God's comfort, save the disbelieving people." Now for the footnote. Benjamin was in custody, which is why Jacob sent his sons to inquire about him. But Jacob also told them to inquire about Joseph. He believed Joseph was still alive, because he had either seen this in a dream or been informed by the angel of death that the latter had not taken Joseph's soul. Despair not of God's comfort means that the brothers should not lose hope in God's mercy. So that last footnote I just find interesting in that, I don't know where they get this information about the possibility of the angel of death coming to Jacob and informing him that Joseph was still alive. I don't know where that came from. I just thought that was an interesting detail that I had to include in this discussion, because what? Whoa. All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the final passage that I think is worth discussing in chapter or Surah 12 of the Quran, and this section is concerning verses 88 through 93. And I think we're going to go probably verse by verse or every couple verses and then read the footnotes and discuss, because this section concerns the great big reveal when Joseph finally is like, "Hey, it's the boy that you threw down a well. I'm still alive." This is that whole reveal, and it's beautiful, just like how it's beautiful in Genesis, and therefore it's worth talking about. So let's read verses 88 through 90 and then read some footnotes and then continue. "So when they entered upon him, they said, 'O Viceroy,'" as in Joseph, "'affliction has befallen us and our people. We bring but meager merchandise, yet grant us full measure and be charitable unto us. Truly God shall recompense the charitable.' He said, 'Do you know what you have done with Joseph and his brother when you were ignorant?' They said, 'Art thou indeed Joseph?' He said, 'I am Joseph, and this is my brother. God has been gracious unto us. Verily, whosoever is reverent and patient, surely God neglects not the reward of the virtuous." So now let's read the footnotes associated with verses 89 and 90. Joseph's question is about their separating him from Benjamin when they were young, and about their harming him, Joseph, and perpetrating injustices against Benjamin, such as debasing and reviling him. Joseph then makes an excuse for his brother's wrong actions, as he says, "when you were ignorant," which refers to either their ignorance of the vileness of their actions or their general state of ignorance on account of their youth. It is said that the brothers recognized that their interlocutor was Joseph when he spoke these words to them, or when he smiled, or when he removed his crown. It's pretty wild stuff. Let's continue, because the big kind of reaction of the brothers, there's more to it. So let's read verses 91 and 92. "By God," they said, "God has preferred thee over us, and we were at fault. He said, there is no reproach against you this day. God will forgive you, and he is the most merciful of the merciful." Now for the footnote. Joseph's statement, "there is no reproach against you this day," is described in some sources as a beautiful form of forgiveness. Reproach here can also mean physical punishment. These words of forgiveness and comfort uttered by Joseph were cited by the prophet Muhammad when he too forgave members of his tribe who had been his oppressors. It is said that during the conquest of Makkah, when the prophet had overtaken the city and the Meccan idolaters had no hope of escape, the prophet addressed the Quraysh, "O party of the Quraysh, what do you see me doing with you?" They answered, "Good. You are a noble brother, and the son of a noble brother." Then the prophet said, "Verily I say to you as Joseph said to his brothers, there is no reproach against you. Go, for you are free." So that's an interesting little parallel between the story of Joseph and the prophet Muhammad. Basically Muhammad forgave some idolaters, like in the same way that Joseph forgave his brothers. It's kind of cool. It's a cool little detail. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's reread verse 92 as it's still Joseph speaking in verse 93. And then let's discuss the footnote associated with 93. He said, "There is no reproach against you this day. God will forgive you, and he is the most merciful of the merciful. Take this shirt of mine and cast it upon my father's face. He will come to see, and bring me your family all together." Now for the footnote for 93. Joseph's order to have his shirt cast over Jacob's face was reportedly based on divine inspiration. The shirt is said to be the same shirt made from the silk of paradise that Gabriel brought to Joseph when he was in the well. So I didn't go over this earlier in the review, but when Joseph was in the well, there's this idea in Islam that the angel Gabriel gave him this special shirt that is kind of magical, and that's what ends up happening here in the closing of chapter 12 is Jacob is brought to Egypt, the whole family's together, and Joseph does cast this shirt over his father's face, and all of a sudden Jacob can see again. If you'll remember, we said earlier that Jacob had his eyes had turned white and that he might have been blind. Well, now he can see. Very cool stuff. And the closing of chapter 12 is very similar to the closing of the story of Joseph in Genesis, in that everybody's they've forgiven each other, they're back together. The once splintered family is now a whole family again. It's beautiful.